Hello, dear listeners. I'm your storyteller, and I'm here to guide you into a peaceful and relaxing journey tonight. If you're using this story to wind down and drift off to sleep, I'm so glad you've joined me. But before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a moment of calm. I'd also love to know, where are you from and what time is it where you are? Now take a deep breath, get comfortable, and let the soothing story help you relax and unwind. In a small corner of the city, tucked between a dusty bookstore and an old record shop, there was a cafe that most people walked by without a second glance. It wasn't particularly fancy or large. In fact, it seemed almost invisible, blending into the bustling street as if it had been there forever and never at all. It had no name on the door, just a small sign that read "Open." The few who noticed it and decided to step inside always found themselves surprised, as if they had stumbled upon a secret place that wasn't meant to be found. Emma was one of those people. It was a grey Thursday afternoon when she first spotted the cafe. She had been rushing home from work, her head filled with the noise of emails, deadlines, and the exhaustion of another long day. The rain had just begun to fall, pattering gently on the sidewalk. As she hurried past the bookstore, she saw a faint light flickering inside the little cafe and felt an inexplicable pull. Without quite knowing why, Emma pushed open the door and stepped inside. The moment she entered, the world outside seemed to melt away. The air was warm and filled with the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee, vanilla, and something else. Something she couldn't quite place, but felt oddly comforting, like a memory she couldn't recall. The cafe was small, with a handful of tables and soft golden lighting that made everything glow. Old-fashioned jazz music played softly in the background. "Hello there," a voice greeted her warmly. Emma looked up to see an elderly man behind the counter. He had kind eyes and a gentle smile, and wore a neatly pressed apron. There was something timeless about him, as though he belonged to another era. "Hi," Emma replied, feeling a little disoriented. "I didn't know this place existed. I've walked down this street 100 times. The man chuckled softly. "Most people don't see it unless they need it," he said mysteriously. "Welcome. What can I get for you today?" Emma hesitated, glancing around. The cafe felt strangely familiar, even though she was certain she'd never been there before. "Just a coffee, please," she said finally. "Black, no sugar." The man nodded and turned to prepare her drink, moving with a quiet grace that made her feel like she had stepped back in time. Emma took a seat by the window, looking out at the rain. It was strange. She could see the street, the people rushing by with their umbrellas, but it all felt distant, as if the cafe were set apart from the world outside. A moment later, the man brought her coffee and set it down in front of her. "Here you go," he said. "I made it just the way you like it." Emma looked up, surprised. "How did you know?" The man just smiled, a twinkle in his eye. "A good barista knows what his customers need," he said lightly. "Enjoy." Emma took a sip, and the warmth of the coffee spread through her, easing the tension in her shoulders. It tasted perfect, exactly how she liked it, strong and smooth, with a hint of something sweet. She felt herself relax for the first time all day. She glanced around the cafe, noticing the little details. There were old photographs on the walls, sepia-toned and faded with age. They showed people laughing, drinking coffee, playing chess, scenes from what looked like the 1920s or 30s. There was an old radio on a shelf, softly playing a song she remembered from her childhood, though she couldn't recall its name. There were a few other customers, all seated quietly, lost in their own thoughts. An elderly woman was knitting by the fireplace, her face serene. A young man sat at a corner table, scribbling furiously in a notebook. None of them seemed to notice her, as if they were caught in their own little bubbles of time. Emma finished her coffee and stood up, feeling a little lighter, as if she had left her worries at the door. She approached the counter, where the old man was polishing a glass. "That was wonderful," she said. "Thank you. How much do I owe you?" The man waved his hand dismissively. "No charge today," he said. "It's on the house." Emma frowned, puzzled. "Really? But I—" He cut her off with a gentle smile. "Consider it a gift," he said, "for finding us today." Emma hesitated. It all felt strange, surreal even, but the kindness in his eyes made her nod. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'll definitely come back." "We'll be here," he replied, "whenever you need us." As she turned to leave, she paused by the door. Something on the wall had caught her eye, a small framed photograph of a group of people standing outside the cafe. She looked closer and felt her heart skip a beat. In the photograph, she recognized the old man behind the counter, looking much younger but unmistakably him. And standing beside him, smiling and holding a coffee cup, was a woman who looked just like her. Emma stepped back, her breath catching in her throat. It couldn't be. How could there be a photograph of her in a place she'd never been before? She turned back to ask the man about it, but he was gone. The counter was empty, and the cafe was silent, the music having faded away. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. She glanced back at the photograph, but now it was just a blurry image, too faded to make out any details. With a shaky breath, she pushed open the door and stepped back into the rain. The moment she did, it felt like she had crossed a threshold back into reality. The noise of the city rushed back in, loud and chaotic. She turned around, but the cafe seemed different now, darker, almost hidden in the shadows. Emma walked away, her mind spinning. Had she imagined it all? She looked down at her hand, still warm from the coffee cup, and knew she hadn't. As she made her way home, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just visited a place out of time, a place that wasn't meant to be found by everyone. But she knew one thing for certain: she would be back. And somewhere, behind the unseen door of the little cafe, time waited patiently for her return. It had been a week since Emma first stepped into the little cafe. Each day since, as she passed by on her way home from work, she found herself glancing towards the unassuming door, half expecting it to have vanished like a dream. But the sign still hung there, small and humble, open. It was as if it were quietly calling to her. After a particularly exhausting day at the office, Emma decided she needed a break from her routine. Without hesitation, she stepped into the cafe once more. The warmth enveloped her immediately, the scent of fresh coffee and vanilla easing the tension from her body. The jazz music was playing softly again, a familiar tune that made her feel at home. The scene inside was just as she remembered: soft golden lights, cozy armchairs, and an air of timeless tranquility. The old man behind the counter greeted her with a nod and a smile, as if he had been expecting her. "Welcome back," he said warmly. "Good to see you again." Emma smiled back, though she couldn't help but feel a little unnerved. "Hi," she replied. "It's strange. I was just thinking about this place all week. I don't usually come to this part of the street, but some places have a way of drawing us in," the old man said with a knowing look. "What can I get for you today?" "Just the same as last time," Emma said, feeling oddly comforted by the idea of repeating the familiar ritual. "Black coffee, no sugar." He nodded and turned to prepare her drink. Emma took her usual seat by the window, gazing out at the bustling street beyond. The rain had started again, just like the first time she'd visited. It created a gentle rhythm, tapping against the glass, making the world outside feel distant and dreamlike. As she watched the people pass by, a shadow fell over her table. Emma looked up to see a young woman standing there, her expression one of surprise and hesitation. "Excuse me," the woman said softly. "Is this seat taken?" Emma gestured to the empty chair across from her. "No, go ahead." The woman sat down with a relieved smile. She had a kind face, framed by dark curls that were slightly damp from the rain. "Thank you," she said. "I almost didn't come in. I wasn't sure if this place was real or if I was just imagining it." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "You felt that too?" The woman nodded. Yes, I've passed by here so many times, but I never noticed it before. Today it was like I couldn't ignore it any longer. Emma leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. That's exactly how I felt the first time I came here. It's almost as if the cafe only appears when you need it. The woman smiled, a wistful expression crossing her face. Maybe that's true, she said. I've had a rough few days, and I just needed a place to catch my breath. The old man approached their table, setting down Emma's coffee and a cup of tea for the newcomer. Here you go, he said with his usual gentle smile. Something to help you both unwind. The woman blinked in surprise. I didn't order anything yet. The old man chuckled softly. You didn't need to. This one's on the house. Emma watched the exchange, a familiar sense of déjà vu washing over her. It was exactly how he had treated her on her first visit. She glanced at the woman, who was cradling the cup of tea as if it were a lifeline. What's your name? Emma asked. Sophie, the woman replied. And you? Emma, she said, holding out her hand. They shook hands, and for a moment, Emma felt an unexpected connection, as if they had known each other far longer than the few seconds they had just met. It was as if the little cafe had brought them together for a reason. They fell into easy conversation, sharing stories about their lives. Sophie worked as a freelance writer, always chasing the next deadline, always feeling the pressure to create. Emma found herself opening up about her own stresses at work, the long hours, and the feeling of being stuck in a never-ending cycle. It's funny, Sophie said after a while, staring into her tea. I've been feeling lost lately, like I don't know where I'm supposed to be. But sitting here with you, it feels like I'm exactly where I need to be. Emma nodded, feeling the same sense of calm. I know what you mean. It's like this place is outside of time, a little haven where we can just be ourselves. The old man approached their table again, carrying a small plate of cookies. Something sweet to go with your conversation, he said with a wink. Emma laughed. You really do know exactly what we need. He simply smiled. It's my job to notice these things. As they nibbled on the cookies, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she had seen Sophie before, though she couldn't place where. It was like meeting an old friend she hadn't seen in years. Sophie, she said hesitantly, do you believe in fate, or that certain people are meant to cross paths?
Sophie looked thoughtful. I don't know, she admitted, but I do believe that some meetings feel different, like they were meant to happen, even if we don't understand why. Emma nodded slowly, a shiver running down her spine. That's exactly how I feel right now. They sat in silence for a moment, both of them looking around the cafe as if searching for answers in its quiet corners. The old photographs on the wall seemed to watch them with patient eyes, as though they held secrets from another time. When they finally stood to leave, Sophie gave Emma a hug. I'm glad I met you today, she said softly. Maybe we'll see each other again. I'd like that, Emma replied, meaning it. They parted ways at the door, each stepping back into the rain-soaked street, but Emma felt a warmth linger in her chest. She turned back to look at the cafe one last time, and for a fleeting moment, she thought she saw Sophie's face in one of the faded photographs on the wall, a face that looked just like hers, but from decades ago. Emma blinked, and the image was gone, replaced by a shadowy blur. With a final glance, she walked away, her mind buzzing with questions. It seemed the little cafe wasn't done with its mysteries yet.
Emma couldn't get the cafe out of her mind. It was like a song that wouldn't stop playing, haunting her thoughts during meetings, following her on the subway, lingering even in her dreams. There was something about that place, its warmth, its timeless quality, and the strange way it made her feel like she belonged there. And then there was Sophie, a stranger who had felt like a friend she hadn't seen in years. The following Saturday, Emma couldn't resist the urge to return. It was early in the morning, and the city was still waking up, the streets quieter than usual. As she approached the cafe, she felt a sense of anticipation, almost as if she were visiting an old friend. The doorbell chimed softly as she stepped inside. The familiar warmth and scent of coffee greeted her. The cafe was quieter than usual, with only a couple of patrons, a young man reading a thick, worn book, and an elderly woman knitting by the window. The old man behind the counter looked up and gave her a smile. "Good morning, Emma," he said, as if they were old friends. "It's nice to see you again." "Good morning," she replied, returning his smile. "I couldn't stay away." He nodded knowingly. "Some places have a way of calling us back." He set a cup of coffee on the counter before she could even order. "Black, no sugar," he said, with a twinkle in his eye. Emma took the cup gratefully and moved towards the wall of photographs. She had been thinking about them ever since her last visit. There was something strange about those photos, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. The faces seemed familiar, even though she knew she had never seen them before. As she sipped her coffee, she leaned in closer to one of the photos. It was sepia-toned, showing a group of people standing outside the cafe, laughing and holding cups of coffee. The building looked the same as it did now, but the people's clothing suggested it was taken decades ago, perhaps in the 1940s. Her breath caught in her throat. There, standing in the middle of the group, was a young woman who looked exactly like Sophie. It wasn't just a resemblance, it was her. The same dark curls, the same warm smile. Emma glanced towards the door, half expecting Sophie to walk in at that moment, but she didn't. Instead, the old man behind the counter was watching her, his expression inscrutable. "Is everything all right?" he asked gently. Emma pointed at the photograph. "This woman," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "She looks just like my friend Sophie, but that's impossible, isn't it? This photo must be at least 70 years old." The old man walked over, his eyes softening as he looked at the photograph. "Time has a way of playing tricks on us," he said quietly. "Sometimes the past and the present aren't as far apart as they seem." Emma frowned, feeling a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean?" He met her eyes, and for a moment, she saw a depth there that took her breath away. It was as if he held all the secrets of the cafe in his gaze. "Have you ever felt like you've lived the same moment before?" he asked. "Like déjà vu, but stronger? As if you've walked this path many times in different lifetimes?" Emma swallowed hard. "Yes," she whispered. "That's how I felt when I met Sophie." The old man nodded slowly. "Some souls are connected across time," he said. "They find each other again and again, no matter the era. The cafe, well, it has a way of bringing those souls together when they need it the most." Emma felt dizzy, as if the ground beneath her had shifted. "Are you saying that Sophie and we knew each other in another time?" "I'm not saying anything for certain," he said with a small smile. "But sometimes the cafe offers a glimpse of what once was." She looked back at the photograph, her fingers tracing the face of the woman who looked so much like Sophie. "Then where is she now?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Perhaps she'll find her way back here," the old man said gently. "Or perhaps she's already here, in ways you cannot yet understand." Emma turned to him, 1,000 questions bubbling up inside her. But before she could ask any of them, the doorbell chimed again, and a new customer walked in. It was a young man with sandy blonde hair and bright blue eyes. He seemed just as surprised as Emma had been when he first stepped inside, looking around the cafe with a mixture of awe and confusion. "Hi," he said awkwardly to the old man. "I was just passing by and I don't know why, but I felt like I needed to come in." The old man gave him the same welcoming smile he had given Emma. "You're in the right place," he said. "What can I get for you?" Emma watched the exchange, feeling an odd sense of déjà vu. There was something familiar about the young man too, though she couldn't place it. He glanced her way, offering a shy smile. "Hi," he said. "I'm Tom."
"Emma," she replied, shaking his hand. His grip was warm and familiar, like shaking hands with an old friend. Tom hesitated, looking around the cafe. "This place?" he said slowly. "It feels like I've been here before, but I know I haven't. It's strange." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "I felt the same way," she said quietly. "You're not alone?" The old man brought Tom a cup of coffee without asking, setting it down with a knowing smile. "It seems you two have some catching up to do," he said with a wink. Emma and Tom exchanged a look, both of them feeling the weight of something unspoken, something lingering just beneath the surface of their conversation. As they sat together, sipping their coffee in silence, Emma couldn't help but wonder what invisible thread had pulled them both into this little cafe. She felt like she was on the edge of understanding something profound, something that connected her not just to Sophie and Tom, but to the very fabric of the cafe itself. For now, though, she let the questions rest. The rain outside continued to fall, creating a soothing backdrop as she settled into the moment, feeling for the first time in a long while like she was exactly where she needed to be.
Emma and Tom settled into their chairs, the soft jazz playing in the background, adding a soothing rhythm to the moment. The rain had picked up outside, tapping against the window panes in a gentle cadence, as if urging them to stay a little longer. The cafe felt like a cocoon, insulating them from the world outside. Tom looked around, his eyes wide with a mixture of wonder and bewilderment. "This place," he murmured, his voice trailing off. "It feels like something out of a dream." Have you ever felt like you're standing on the edge of a memory you can't quite grasp? Emma nodded, feeling the same inexplicable familiarity she had when she first entered the cafe. "Yes," she admitted. "It's like déjà vu but deeper. It's hard to explain, but I felt the same way when I first met Sophie." Tom's eyes lit up at the mention of Sophie. "Sophie?" he asked. "Who's that?" Emma hesitated, wondering if she should share what she'd seen in the photograph. "She's a woman I met here a few days ago," she said slowly. "We talked for a while, and it felt like we were old friends. But then I saw a photo on the wall, a photo from decades ago, and there was a woman who looked exactly like her." Tom's brow furrowed as he processed this information. "That's strange," he said, almost to himself. "You're not the first person to mention something like that. I had a similar experience once, at a place I visited as a child. I saw an old photograph, and there was someone in it who looked just like me. My family thought it was a coincidence, but it's stuck with me ever since." Emma leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. "What if it's not a coincidence?" she said, her voice hushed. "What if there's more to it? This place, it feels different, like it's out of time." Tom looked at her, a spark of recognition in his eyes. "You think this cafe is connected to something bigger, don't you?" Before Emma could respond, the old man approached their table. He was carrying a small tray with 2 cups of tea, even though neither of them had ordered. He set the cups down gently, his smile as enigmatic as ever. "I thought you both might enjoy a change from coffee," he said with a wink. "Something to help you think more clearly." Tom took a sip, the warmth of the tea spreading through him like a calming wave. "Thank you," he said. "This is exactly what I needed." Emma couldn't shake the feeling that the old man knew more than he was letting on. "Can I ask you something?" she said, looking up at him. He raised an eyebrow, as if amused by her question. "You can ask," he replied, "but whether or not I answer is another matter." Emma smiled despite herself. "This cafe," she began, choosing her words carefully, "it feels different, like it exists outside of time. Is there something special about this place?" The old man's eyes crinkled at the corners, his smile deepening. "Ah, you've noticed," he said softly. "Most people don't. They come and go enjoying a coffee or a chat, but they never quite see what's right in front of them." Emma felt her heart skip a beat. "So I'm right," she breathed. "There is something unusual about it." The old man leaned closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "This cafe has been here a long time," he said. "Longer than anyone can remember, and yes, it's special. It finds people who need it, people who are searching for something, even if they don't know what it is." Tom looked at him stunned. "You mean it's not just a regular cafe? It's magic?" The old man chuckled. "Magic is a strong word," he said. "But perhaps it's close enough. Let's just say this place exists at the crossroads of time and memory. It's a sanctuary for those who need a moment to pause, to reflect, and sometimes to remember." Emma's mind raced. "To remember what?" she asked. The old man straightened up, his expression softening. "That depends on the person," he said. "Some come here seeking a memory from a past life, a lost love, or a connection they can't explain. Others find comfort in simply being here without needing to know why." Tom set his cup down, his hands trembling slightly. "I feel like I've been looking for this place my whole life," he said quietly. "Like there was always something missing, and now that I'm here, it's almost within reach." The old man nodded. "That's the beauty of it," he said. "The cafe offers what each person needs, even if they don't realize it." Emma glanced at the wall of photographs again. "Is that why Sophie was here?" she asked. "Is she connected to this place somehow?" The old man's smile faded, replaced by a look of gentle sadness. "Sophie," he murmured. "Yes, she has a deep connection to this cafe, one that spans many lifetimes." Emma's eyes widened. "You mean she's been here before, in different lives?" The old man gave a slow, solemn nod. "There are souls who find their way back here time and time again," he said. "They're drawn to each other, across the veil of time, searching for the comfort of a familiar face." Tom took a deep breath, trying to make sense of it all. "So, what does that mean for us?" he asked. "Why are we here together now?" The old man's eyes twinkled. "Perhaps you're here to remember something," he said. "Or perhaps to create a new memory that will linger across time. Only you can decide what that means." Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. She looked at Tom, and in that moment she knew he felt it too. The unspoken connection, the strange familiarity that had been there from the moment they met. The old man patted her hand gently. "Don't worry too much about finding the answers," he said. "Sometimes the questions are more important, and sometimes the best thing you can do is simply enjoy the moment." He gave them one last smile before walking back to the counter, leaving Emma and Tom alone with their thoughts. They sat in silence for a while, the rain outside creating a soft, soothing backdrop. Finally, Tom broke the silence. "Emma," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "do you think we've met before? In another time? Another life?" Emma looked at him, searching his face for something she couldn't quite name. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but it feels like we have, doesn't it?" Tom nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said, "it really does." They both took a deep breath, as if synchronizing with each other, letting the warmth of the cafe and the quiet magic of the moment wash over them. For now, they decided to simply be. To let the cafe's timeless magic work its way into their hearts, one sip of tea at a time. The next morning, Emma awoke with a sense of urgency she couldn't quite explain. Her dreams had been filled with fragments, glimpses of the cafe, the old man's knowing smile, and Tom's familiar blue eyes. The images lingered in her mind like pieces of a puzzle she was desperate to solve. By the time she had her coat on and stepped out into the brisk morning air, she knew there was only one place she wanted to be. As she made her way down the street, she spotted Tom standing outside the cafe. He looked up as she approached, his face lighting up with a smile that reached his eyes. "Morning," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I had a feeling I'd see you here." Emma gave him a knowing look. "I couldn't stay away," she admitted. "It's like this place has a pull, doesn't it?" Tom nodded. "Yeah, I've been thinking about it all night. It feels like there's something we're supposed to discover together." They stepped inside, and the familiar chime of the bell greeted them. The cafe was quiet, the soft hum of the espresso machine the only sound. The old man was behind the counter, polishing a glass with a cloth. He glanced up and gave them a smile. "Ah, Emma, Tom," he said warmly. "Back again, I see. I'm glad."
Emma walked straight to the wall of photographs. The faces in the pictures seemed to be calling to her, like echoes from a forgotten past. She paused in front of a new photo she hadn't noticed before. It showed a man and a woman sitting at a table, leaning in close as if sharing a secret. The man's eyes were a startling shade of blue, just like Tom's. "Tom," she said, motioning him over. "Look at this." He stepped closer, squinting at the photo. "Is that me?" he asked, his voice laced with disbelief. "No, it can't be. This must be from the 1950s. Emma's heart raced. "But it looks exactly like you," she insisted. "And the woman, she looks familiar too. It's almost like it's us," Tom finished, his voice barely a whisper. "But that's impossible." The old man had drifted over, standing quietly behind them. "Impossible," he repeated, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Or perhaps not as impossible as you think." Emma turned to face him, her eyes wide. "What's going on here?" she demanded. "Why do we look like the people in these photos?" The old man sighed, his expression turning thoughtful. "This cafe has a way of preserving moments," he explained. "Not just any moments, but the ones that matter most, the ones where connections are made, connections that transcend time." Tom stared at the old man, searching his face for answers. "Are you saying we've been here before, in another life?" The old man nodded slowly. "Many times," he said softly. "You and Sophie, and now you and Emma. You found each other here, in different eras, over and over again." Emma felt a chill run through her. But why? Why do we keep finding our way back here? "Perhaps there's something unfinished," the old man suggested. "A story that's still being written, a bond that needs to be recognized." Tom took Emma's hand, squeezing it gently. "I've felt this connection since the moment I met you," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "It's like we're picking up where we left off, but I don't even know where that was." Emma's eyes welled with tears. "I felt it too," she whispered. "But it's scary, Tom. I don't understand it." The old man stepped back, giving them space. "Understanding will come," he said. "For now, just trust the feeling. Let the cafe do its work." Tom turned to Emma, his grip on her hand tightening. "Maybe we're supposed to find out what happened before," he said. "Maybe that's why we're here again, why we can't seem to stay away." Emma nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. "But how do we find out?" she asked. "We can't just look up our past lives in a history book." The old man chuckled softly. "No, you can't," he agreed. "But sometimes the answers are closer than you think. Listen to the whispers in the air. Pay attention to the memories that surface when you're here. The cafe will guide you." They stood there for a long moment, the three of them, wrapped in the quiet magic of the place. Emma felt a strange sensation, like a breeze brushing against her skin, even though the air inside the cafe was still. Tom closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. "I can almost hear it," he said. "It's like a distant song just out of reach." The old man smiled. "You're starting to remember," he said. "Keep listening." Emma looked back at the photograph, her fingers tracing the faces of the couple who looked so much like them. "Do you think we were happy?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The old man's expression softened. "You were," he said, "but life has its twists and turns. Sometimes happiness is interrupted by circumstances beyond our control." Tom opened his eyes, his gaze locking with Emma's. "Then maybe this is our second chance," he said, "to find the happiness we lost before." Emma felt her heart swell with a mixture of hope and fear. "But what if we can't?" she asked. "What if the past repeats itself?" The old man's smile was gentle, almost fatherly. "The past doesn't have to repeat itself," he said. "You have a choice, both of you. The cafe has given you this moment, this chance. It's up to you what you do with it." They stood there, hand in hand, the rain continuing to patter against the windows. Emma felt a sense of peace settle over her, as if the weight of countless lifetimes had been lifted, if only for a moment. "Then let's make the most of it," Tom said softly. "Whatever happens, I'm glad we found each other again." Emma nodded, squeezing his hand. "Me too," she said. "Maybe this time we'll get it right." The old man gave them a final approving nod. "Take your time," he said. "The cafe isn't going anywhere." As he turned to walk back behind the counter, Emma felt a rush of gratitude for this strange, magical place. It was more than a cafe. It was a crossroads, a bridge between past and present, a place where lost souls could find each other once more.
She took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of Tom's hand in hers, and for the first time, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they were exactly where they needed to be. The air inside the cafe felt different as Emma and Tom returned the following day. It was as if the space itself had become charged with a quiet anticipation. The sunlight streaming through the window cast a golden glow, illuminating tiny dust particles that danced like fragments of old memories brought to life. Emma couldn't help but notice a change in Tom's demeanor. He seemed calmer, more grounded, as if the revelations of the previous day had given him a sense of clarity. She felt it too, a deeper connection to the place and to Tom that she couldn't fully explain. They took their usual seats by the window, but before they could settle in, the old man approached, carrying a small box. He set it down on the table between them with a mysterious smile. "I thought you might find this interesting," he said. His voice was gentle, as though he were speaking to old friends. Emma glanced at Tom before reaching out to lift the lid. Inside there were faded postcards, delicate handkerchiefs, and a small leather-bound book. It looked like a collection of forgotten mementos, carefully preserved over the years. "What is this?" Emma asked, her fingers tracing the edge of the book. The old man folded his hands in front of him. "These are remnants of the past," he said softly. "Memories left behind by those who once frequented this cafe. Each item tells a story, just as you are part of this place's story now." Tom picked up a postcard, turning it over in his hand. The ink had faded, but he could just make out the words. "To my dearest, I will find you again in this lifetime, or the next." A shiver ran down his spine. "It's like they knew," he whispered. "Knew they would be back." Emma opened the leather-bound book. It was a journal, filled with neat, slanted handwriting. As she skimmed through the pages, her breath caught when she recognized a name, Sophie. "Look," she said, showing the page to Tom. "It's her, it's Sophie." Tom leaned closer, his eyes narrowing as he read aloud. "The cafe is a sanctuary, a place where time folds in on itself. I've met him again, as I always do, but I fear it's not yet our time." Emma's hand flew to her mouth. "Do you think she was writing about you?" she asked, her voice trembling with the weight of the realization. Tom swallowed hard. "I don't know," he said, shaking his head. "But it feels like it, doesn't it?" The old man gave them a sympathetic look. "You see now," he said quietly. "This cafe has witnessed many such meetings, lovers, friends, soulmates finding each other across the vast stretches of time. It's a place where unfinished stories come to rest, if only for a moment." Emma set the journal down, her mind swirling with 1,000 questions. "But why us?" she asked. "Why have we found each other here in this lifetime?" The old man's smile was tinged with a hint of sadness. "Because there's something you need to remember," he said. "Something that's been lost in the mists of time." Tom leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples as if trying to piece together a fragmented memory. "I've had flashes," he admitted. "Little glimpses of another life, a park, a dance, a promise made under a moonlit sky. I thought they were just dreams, but now—" Emma reached out, covering his hand with hers. "Now you think they were real," she finished for him. "Memories from another life." Tom met her gaze, his eyes filled with a deep, unspoken understanding. "Yes," he said, "and I think we're supposed to find out what happened, what went wrong." The old man nodded. "The answers are here," he said, "if you're willing to look for them." He gestured toward the back of the cafe, where a small door stood slightly ajar. Emma hadn't noticed it before. It seemed to blend into the wood-paneled wall, as if it were part of the cafe itself. "What's back there?" Tom asked. The old man's smile widened. "Why don't you find out?" he suggested. "It's a part of the cafe that few ever see, but I believe it's meant for you." Emma and Tom exchanged a look, a silent agreement passing between them. Together they stood and walked toward the door. Emma's heart was pounding in her chest, the anticipation nearly overwhelming. She pushed the door open, revealing a narrow staircase leading downward, illuminated by a soft golden light. They descended the stairs slowly, hand in hand, feeling as though they were stepping into another world. The air grew cooler, and the sound of the cafe above faded away, replaced by a soft whispering like the distant murmur of voices from a forgotten past. At the bottom of the stairs, they found themselves in a small, dimly lit room. It was filled with old furniture, worn armchairs, a dusty piano, and shelves lined with books and trinkets. In the center of the room was a single table, and on it lay a photograph. Emma picked it up, her hands shaking. It was a picture of two people, standing together under a tree in a park. The man had Tom's eyes, and the woman, she realized with a jolt, looked exactly like herself. "This is us," she whispered. "In another time." Tom took the photo from her, his eyes scanning every detail. "We look happy," he said softly. "But there's something in our eyes, like we know it won't last." Emma felt tears welling up. "What happened to us?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Why couldn't we stay together?" Tom wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "Maybe that's why we're here now," he said. "To find out. To get a second chance." The room seemed to hum with energy, as if the very walls were alive with the stories of those who had come before. Emma closed her eyes, letting the sensations wash over her. She could almost hear the echoes of laughter, the soft strains of a piano, the whisper of a promise made long ago. When she opened her eyes again, she knew with a certainty she couldn't explain that this was their moment. Whatever had happened before, whatever choices had pulled them apart, they were here now, together. Tom kissed her forehead gently. "Whatever it is," he said, his voice filled with determination. "We'll face it together this time." Emma nodded, feeling a peace settle over her heart. "Yes," she said. together. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other in the quiet sanctuary of the hidden room. Above them, the sound of the old man's piano playing drifted down the stairs, a soft, lilting melody that seemed to weave itself into the very fabric of time. It was a new beginning, wrapped in the echoes of an old story. And for the first time, Emma felt ready to embrace whatever came next. Emma and Tom climbed back up the narrow staircase, feeling as though they had stepped out of a dream. The old man was waiting for them at the top, his expression gentle and knowing, as if he could see the weight of the discovery they had just made. "You found it, didn't you?" he asked softly. Emma nodded, still holding the photograph tightly in her hand. "We did," she said, "but it's only raised more questions. Why does this place hold so many pieces of our past? And why are we only now starting to remember?" The old man gestured for them to sit, and he brought over 2 steaming cups of tea, the aroma comforting and familiar. He settled into the chair opposite them, clasping his hands together on the table. "This cafe," he began, "exists between moments, between heartbeats. It's a place where the fabric of time wears thin, allowing glimpses of what was and what could be. People come here when they need to remember something forgotten or when they're searching for something they can't quite name." Tom took a sip of his tea, trying to process the old man's words. "So we've been here before?" he said slowly. "In another time, another life." The old man nodded. "Yes, you have. Many times. You were Sophie and James once, before you were Emma and Tom. The cafe has brought you back together again and again, each time offering a chance to rewrite the story." Emma's head was spinning. "But why?" she asked. "Why have we been given so many chances? What are we supposed to change?" The old man's gaze was steady, filled with a wisdom that seemed to stretch back centuries. "There's something unresolved between you," he said. "A promise made long ago, one that was broken before it could be fulfilled. Each time you meet, it's as if the universe is giving you an opportunity to make it right." Emma felt a rush of sadness wash over her. "I don't remember making any promises," she said. "But I feel it, this ache, this longing, like something important is just out of reach." Tom reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "Me too," he said quietly. "It's like a song I can almost hear, but the words are missing." The old man smiled, a touch of amusement in his eyes. "The words will come when you're ready to hear them," he said. "The past is closer than you think, especially in a place like this." He nodded toward the piano in the corner of the cafe. It was an old, upright model, its keys worn and yellowed with age. "Go on," he urged. "Play something, see what memories it brings." Tom hesitated, looking uncertain. "I don't know how to play," he admitted. "At least, I don't think I do." Emma gave him an encouraging smile. "Try," she said softly. "Just let your fingers move." Tom stood, walking over to the piano as if in a trance. He sat down on the bench, his hands hovering over the keys for a moment, before he pressed down. A simple melody filled the air, soft and melancholic, as if it were being played by a pair of ghostly hands. The notes resonated through the room, each one stirring something deep within Emma. She closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. In her mind's eye, she saw flashes of a different time, a park at dusk, the sound of laughter, a dance under the stars. She saw herself in a flowing dress, spinning in Tom's arms as the world faded away around them. Tom's playing grew more confident, the melody becoming richer, filled with an aching beauty that brought tears to her eyes. It was as if he were channeling the emotions of someone who had once played this very song, someone who had loved and lost and hoped for another chance. The old man watched them, his expression softening. You remember, don't you? He asked quietly. Tom looked up, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Yes, he said. I remember dancing with her, promising I'd never let her go. But then Emma opened her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. Something happened, she said, her voice breaking. We were separated. I couldn't find you again. The old man nodded, his gaze distant, as if he were recalling the story himself. Yes, he said. Circumstances beyond your control tore you apart. You searched for each other, but it was too late. The world changed, and you lost each other in the chaos. Tom's hands stilled on the keys, the final notes hanging in the air like a lingering sigh. But why didn't we remember any of this until now? He asked. Why didn't we recognize each other right away? Memory is a tricky thing, the old man explained, especially when it spans lifetimes. The connection is there, but it's buried deep. It takes time, and sometimes a little nudge, to bring it to the surface. Emma glanced down at the photograph still clutched in her hand. Is that what the cafe does? She asked. It helps us remember. The old man's smile was kind. It helps you see what's already inside your heart, he said. This place is a mirror reflecting the truth you carry with you, even when you're not aware of it. Tom stood up from the piano, walking back over to Emma. He took her face in his hands, looking at her as if seeing her for the first time. I remember now, he whispered. I remember the promise I made, that I'd find you no matter what. Emma leaned into his touch, her heart aching with a bitter-sweet joy. And you did, she said. Even when we didn't know it, you found me. The old man rose from his seat, giving them a small, respectful bow. You've come a long way, he said. But the story isn't finished yet. There's still a choice to be made. Tom turned to the old man, his expression determined. What choice? He asked. What do we need to do? The old man's eyes twinkled, filled with a secret he wasn't quite ready to reveal. That's for you to discover, he said. But remember, the past does not have to define your future. You have the power to write a new ending. Emma felt a sense of calm wash over her, as if a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She squeezed Tom's hand, her voice filled with quiet certainty. We'll figure it out, she said. Together. The old man gave them a final, approving nod. Yes, he said. Together. As they left the cafe that evening, the sun setting behind them, Emma felt a warmth in her chest she hadn't felt in years. It was hope, fragile, but growing stronger with every step they took. Whatever came next, she knew they were ready. The familiar chime of the cafe doorbell rang out as Emma and Tom stepped inside. This time, there was a sense of finality in the air, as if the space itself knew this would be their last visit. The golden afternoon light filled the room, casting long, gentle shadows over the tables. The old man was there, standing behind the counter, polishing a teacup with a knowing smile. It's good to see you both, he said warmly. I had a feeling you'd come back today. Emma gave him a smile in return, though it was tinged with a touch of nervousness. We had to, she said. There are things we still need to understand about us and about this place. The old man nodded, setting the teacup down. I imagine you found some answers on your own, he said. But perhaps there are still a few pieces left to uncover. Tom took a deep breath, stepping forward. We remember our past lives, he said. We remember the promises we made and how we lost each other. But what we don't understand is why it keeps happening. Why have we been given so many chances, and why here, in this cafe? The old man gestured for them to sit, and once they were settled, he joined them at the table. "This place is a crossroads," he explained. "It's where time folds in on itself, allowing moments from different lifetimes to meet. Souls that have unfinished business are drawn here over and over again until they find what they're looking for." Emma looked down at her hands, her fingers intertwined with Tom's. "We've been searching for each other for so long," she said softly. "But it feels like there's still something missing, like we haven't completed our story." The old man's gaze softened. "Because each time you found each other, you were afraid," he said gently. "Afraid of losing what you had just rediscovered. Fear is what kept you from fulfilling your promise. It held you back from making the choice that would truly set you free." Tom squeezed Emma's hand, his expression one of determination. "But we're not afraid anymore," he said. "We know now that whatever happens, we'll find each other again. We've done it so many times before." The old man leaned back in his chair, studying them with a thoughtful smile. "Yes," he said slowly, "you've come to understand something that many never do. Love that spans lifetimes is a rare and precious gift, but it also comes with a choice." Emma's brow furrowed. "A choice?" she repeated. "What choice?" The old man stood up, moving over to the piano. He lifted the lid and began to play a soft, melancholic tune, one that felt achingly familiar. It was the same song Tom had played before, the one that stirred memories of moonlit dances and whispered promises. "This time," the old man said over the music, "the choice is yours. You can continue searching for each other across the ages, always finding, always losing. Or you can choose to stay together, to build a life here, in this moment, and let the past go." Emma's heart ached at the thought. "You mean we could stop the cycle?" she asked. "We could live a single life together, without losing each other again?" The old man nodded, his eyes kind but serious. "Yes," he said, "but it means letting go of the memories of your past lives. It means choosing this life, this time, and leaving the rest behind." Tom turned to Emma, his expression filled with a deep, unwavering love. "What do you want?" he asked her. "Whatever you choose, I'll follow." Emma felt a wave of emotions surge through her: love, fear, hope, and a deep, abiding sadness. The memories of their past lives flashed before her eyes. The park, the dances, the promises. They were beautiful, but they were also filled with pain and longing. She realized that it wasn't the memories that mattered most, but the feeling of Tom's hand in hers, the warmth of his smile, the comfort of knowing he was beside her. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she smiled through them. "I choose us," she said. "Here and now, I choose to stay." Tom's eyes shone with tears of his own, and he nodded, pulling her into a tight embrace. "Me too," he whispered. "I choose this life with you." The old man's song came to an end, and the cafe seemed to exhale a sigh of relief, as if the walls themselves had been waiting for this moment. He closed the lid of the piano, turning back to them with a serene smile. "You've made your choice," he said. "And now, the cafe's part in your story comes to an end. Go, live your life together, cherish it, and make it the best one yet." Emma and Tom stood up, hand in hand. They walked toward the door, pausing for a moment to look back. The old man gave them a small wave, his eyes twinkling with a mixture of sadness and joy. "Thank you," Emma said. "For everything." He nodded. "No need to thank me," he replied. "This place exists because of people like you. It's been an honor to witness your journey." With that, Emma and Tom stepped outside. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden light over the street. They stood there for a moment, breathing in the fresh air, feeling a profound sense of peace. As they walked away, Emma felt lighter than she ever had before. The memories of their past lives were fading, but she didn't mind. She had everything she needed right here, in this moment, with Tom by her side. In the quiet of the cafe, the old man turned off the lights, leaving the space bathed in the soft glow of twilight. He sat down at the piano once more, playing a final gentle tune, as if sending off a pair of old friends. And as the last note faded into silence, he asked a question that lingered in the air, meant not just for Emma and Tom, but for anyone who ever found themselves at a crossroads. What would you choose if you knew you had only one chance to truly live and love without looking back?